Polygon Pictures, how you have fallen. I'm typically the one that would be after anything that comes out of Polygon Pictures. Despite it being a CGI studio, I really am gravitated towards the stories they end up adapting. But unfortunately, ESTAB Life, as much as I want to give it a chance, this is hard to get through, but it's my impressions on the first 3 episodes of the series, so let's jump right into it. ESTAB Life, or Establishment Life, Great Escape, has basically been dropped 3 episodes in the West, and I've already jumped through all 3 of them. And like I said earlier, I typically don't shy away from CGI shows, and especially with Polygon Pictures. I've loved Nice Sidonia, I've loved Ajin, so much of their work. Even the Godzilla films I gravitated towards. But unfortunately for ESTAB Life, there was one key thing that had me a little worried when we first did our preview of this particular season, and that was the fact that it was a multimedia project. And usually what comes with multimedia projects is not typically a manga or something like that. It's always a mobile game. And despite the fact that Shoji Gato is essentially doing the writing for the series, and Gato is known for creating Full Metal Panic, Amagi Brilliant Park. Yes, even though I had problems with Copcraft, there was still some great stuff behind that. This is essentially showing its signs of being a mobile game, unfortunately. For those that have never played a mobile game that has some sort of story connected to it, typically your Japanese-based gacha games and whatnot, is they typically will have a very chapter-based story system. And especially when you're dealing with multiple categories of clusters they have in this particular story, it's going to be very segmented. Every episode is going to feel very episodic, and that you're going to tell a story about a specific area and then move on. And unfortunately, this isn't a case of something like Kino's Journey. I love Kino's Journey, and that whole concept there is going to different clusters of population that all have their own way of handling things and essentially exploring the concepts of that place and then moving on. You would think that would have a similar thing here, but it doesn't. It really doesn't. ESTAB Life does not take itself seriously at all. It essentially is a future where mankind is sort of in what they call clusters, and these are like these walled-in areas of population. And they haven't really revealed too much about the world itself. I know there's plenty of context within the actual synopsises for this series, but I don't want to look back at that. I really want the story to tell me. But so far, what we get an idea of is that each of these clusters of populations that are segmented away from each other, you essentially have a population that is run in some sort of different way in each area. This doesn't seem too obvious early on, as the first episode opens up with essentially a teacher who's kind of tired of teaching. But even though he wants to stop teaching, he's not allowed to. It seems like this population or this governance forces you to do what you essentially established to do. You're going to be a teacher. That's all you can be. Take a break, take a vacation, but you're coming back and you're going to teach. It's all you do. And he doesn't like this. He doesn't think anybody's listening to him, which is kind of cute later on to find out that Ekwa, the main character, essentially has been listening to him. But he doesn't want to be a teacher. But he can't quit. So he has to enlist somebody to extract him from there. And that's where we get our main characters introduced, which is Ekwa, Fedis, Martis, and Ula. I think it's Ula. Ula, I think. Ula, something, a dog. They essentially will come in, take a person, and essentially transport them across the border, essentially, out of the restraints of this cluster and into another one, where they can possibly do whatever they want to do. But it only hints at the idea that you're not allowed to do what you want to do. Like, you're forced to do something that you were essentially born to do, I guess. But this becomes more wild as we get to the second story, which essentially is this entire town full of Yakuza. And they even have, like, weather reports talking about, you're going to have a lot of bullets over here because they're all shooting each other. Like, this is a virtuous city or cluster where everybody's focus is on the virtues of each of their gangs. And it seems like it's natural in this area. But you have a guy that wants to get out of it, and you're not really allowed to leave. Again, so they call the extractors. Extractors come in and basically get them out of there. And then you have the final one, which is essentially It was actually, they didn't leave a cluster. It was a cluster that had a west and east side. One side was about communism, one was about capitalism, and they wanted to go to capitalism because they want to do what they want to do. So they have to essentially extract them over this railway that's not really going to another cluster. So again, it's establishing really early on that every one of these clusters has a sort of theme to it, and everybody's kind of trapped in that theme. And I think the thing that this reminds me more of, rather than Kino's Journey, which is her going into a location that's kind of has its own quirk or its rule sets, and then observing it or possibly doing something against it. This is more in the realm of something like Sakugan. If anybody missed that series, Sakugan was essentially about everybody living underground in this abyss, and they would be inside of these domes, and they were traveling from dome to dome. And each one of these had a sort of theme to it. But it never took itself serious like Kino's Journey did. And I think ESTAB Life is similar to that. It doesn't take itself seriously. You essentially have the Yakuza guy wants to get out of there so he can become a magical girl. You have the penguin people who don't like to be forced not to do the performances they want to do, so they go over to here. It's never taking itself seriously. But I think that in lies my issue that I have with the show so far is it feels so fluffy and so lighthearted and so kind of comical about each of the worlds they go to, or each of the clusters they go to, or each of these populaces that have their own rule set, that it never really does enough with each one of them. Like I said before, technically with the teacher, it was kind of establishing this idea that he was a good teacher in the end. It's just he didn't think anybody heard him. With the virtuous town, it's really about just doing what you want to do, escaping from that. An ongoing theme throughout the entire thing is Equa telling these people that sometimes running away is a good thing. It's better to run away and live. Sometimes you have to run to live. And yes, you can kind of argue that that's kind of an idea of escapism. It's the title's ESTAB Life. It's this idea of running away from your duties, your responsibilities, and doing your own thing, which is, yeah, in some sense, sometimes a really bad thing to do, but it is still hitting on this idea that sometimes you just gotta run away to get to what you want to do. Sometimes you have to leave the thing that you're stuck in order to do the thing you want to do. I think the teacher's a good example. The teacher doesn't like the idea. He's stuck in something and he's not happy. And I can relate to that. This idea of having a job that you just don't like. Well, leave. Go do something else. Seek out the thing, because it's better that you live than to be stuck in your own turmoil. But again, it's very surface level stuff. It's not trying to push too much content here. Outside of that, I think the other issue that I have with the show is I don't really feel the chemistry so far, and I think that's something that this show really needs. It's so centered around this goofy little band of characters that I'm not really getting much out of. Martes is a slime, and so the butt of her joke is that she keeps getting shot in the head by bullets, and she explodes in a slime, and then she regathers herself. She's goofy. He's probably my favorite character so far. Ferris is literally the tsundere that every single time they do a job, she says, I'm not doing this again. You're not going to make me do it. And then the leader, Equa, basically says, please do it. And then she goes, okay, I guess I can't say no. And they end up doing it anyway. So that part's getting a little old. Like, I don't need every single episode, sometimes twice an episode, having her have to force Ferris to join them. And Equa's just kind of the big sister character. She just wants to help everybody. It's kind of hinting a little bit in the third episode that Equa is something special. It's kind of hinting at this idea that she might be, I'm assuming maybe a robot or an AI or something like that. That's my assumption. They have this penguin essentially say, I can't figure out your DNA. You could be 17 years old or you could be 30,000 years old or something like that. I don't know what kind of, if you're human or what. Whereas everybody else is sort of their own race. You have the Wolfman guy, you have the slime girl. Ferris is sort of seen as like a magical girl. She just has some sort of ability to those magic bolts. But Ferris right now is just kind of the question mark, honestly. Visually, it looked good. I mean, this is definitely a different take from Polygon Pictures. Typically, Polygon Pictures is more of a flat style to their art style. They were getting a little more detailed looking with something like Ajin. Whereas this one's trying to do a more cel-shaded look, and I do appreciate that. I like Polygon Pictures trying different art styles, the different cel shading to get a different style from their CGI work. I do like them branching out and trying different things. And I do like the style of this. It still has the trappings that typically you get with CGI and technically Polygon Pictures. They still cut frames, so it does look choppy at times. Characters sometimes do look stiff, but I think overall Polygon Pictures has been kind of one of the better studios for doing a TV series CGI. Yes, you can argue movies, they can pull off a lot of motion and fluidity with CGI, but typically with TV series, most studios don't do very well in fluidity. They're trying to pump out a series that's a TV series on an episode-by-episode basis, and I think Polygon Pictures is one of the better ones at that. And maybe that's the problem with the chemistry feeling right. It just doesn't feel right. I don't feel like the writing's enough there for the moment-to-moment character interactions. Again, besides the whole Ferris' tsundere thing, and Martes is kind of a little bit of a goofball, it doesn't really have funny moments. I mean, the only funny moment I had was this moment where this penguin guy is up on the stepladder so that he can get eye to eye with Equa, and he's interrogating her, and she won't answer the questions right, so he slaps her, and it's like a squeak noise, and she's like, okay. It was just out of nowhere, absolutely silly. And they did have some really cool action scenes. I really did like the scene where Fetis used her heavenly bolt thing, and it literally just starts like bouncing around and hitting all the bullets in different directions. It was like really cool, but that's like the only two really fantastic standout scenes throughout 3 episodes, and so that's the struggle there. But don't get me wrong, it's not as if I want the series to be like super serious and start diving into some mind-bending stuff. It's just I don't feel like there's enough here that says what this is and why you should watch it. It's literally just go to different locations, find somebody wanting to get out, and action scenes shooting drones. It hasn't really done anything to say, oh, this is what this show's doing. Oh, this show's funny, or oh, this show has great action scenes, or oh, this is great animation. It's not doing anything particularly good. So it's a hard sell for me. I kind of want to keep watching it just because, again, I have some trust in Polygon Pictures, and I think Goto is a good writer. Even though I had my problems with Amagi Brilliant Park, he is a good writer. So hopefully something is in there they can finally pull out of this and make it not just the sum of a gacha game, which I'm assuming that's going to be. But anyways, that's my impressions of the first 3 episodes of ESTAB Life. If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button down below. Also, make sure to subscribe if you have not already so you can get all of my coverage of the current anime. I'll be doing first impressions of all the shows this season, as well as doing a coverage of a weekly by weekly basis of certain shows that I find interesting that have things to talk about. Also, make sure to go down in the comments down below. Let me know what you thought of ESTAB Life, or if you're going to be checking out, or if you're not going to be checking out. I'd love to hear from you guys. As always, also have links to our Patreon, our tips link, and our merch store in the description below. We definitely appreciate everybody that supports us, and y'all take care.